Good afternoon. Welcome to the Awakening Entrepreneurial Spirits program on small business. Today we present Program 5 of a 6-part series, which revolves around the characteristics of a business person. The project, Awakening Entrepreneurial Spirit, the Key to Job Creation, emanated from the Pasadena Economic Development Committee. They realized that an effort had to be made to create an awareness of small business in the Humber Valley Bay of Islands region, to give people a basic understanding of small business, and to help them realize that through local investing, a sound community-based economy can be established. Over 30 individuals from Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island were interviewed, and their businesses profiled in a series of videos illustrating the concept of why to as opposed to how to enter the business world. On January 24th, a live 11-hour television broadcast by way of satellite showed these videos as well as a wide range of other local programming to not only the Humber Valley Bay of Islands area and other parts of Newfoundland, but to areas in Canada and the United States as well.
Hello, I'm Bill Pardy, Development Officer with the Town of Pasadena. Our topic in the program today is dealing with the characteristics of entrepreneurship, the differences between, I guess, the characters and traits an entrepreneur needs and those of a small business manager, if there are any. And to discuss this topic with me today, I have on my right Glen Kirby, who has developed an entrepreneurship program with the Western Community College in Stephenville, Newfoundland. And on my left, John Tibbitts, who operates a consulting firm in Cornbrook, Newfoundland, called Business Resources Incorporated. Both these people have a lot of experience dealing with business, involved in business, and certainly I think can talk about the traits that one needs to go into business. I would suggest as you're watching the program as well, you look within yourselves and see what traits you have, the things that you need and the differences, and you'll find that oftentimes entrepreneurs who go into business don't really need all aspects, I guess, of business management to get a business up and running. And would you like to start off and probably give us your perspective on the traits a person needs, some of the things you look for, I guess, in your entrepreneurship program in getting students and fine-tuning the people that you take?
Okay, Bill, first of all, let's look, I guess, at what one could call the elements of the entrepreneurial process. And in a sense, there's three basic elements. First of all, obviously, is the entrepreneur. Secondly, of course, is the opportunity. Without the opportunity, where does one go? And of course, thirdly, is the resources. And I guess, therefore, let's define an entrepreneur really from the perspective of what an entrepreneur does. And an entrepreneur, in essence, takes an opportunity and converts that opportunity into an actual venture by the utilization of resources and such things as that. And once again, if we look at what entrepreneurs do, and I find that the most useful way to look at entrepreneurs is that if lawyers practice law and doctors practice medicine, well then in a sense entrepreneurs innovate. And that really is the essence of entrepreneurship. And again, as you alluded in the introduction, there is a difference obviously between managers and entrepreneurs that we'll obviously get into discussing throughout the program. But I guess the basic difference perhaps is in their strategic orientation. Basically, entrepreneurs have a commitment to opportunity. They want to take advantage of opportunity. Whereas, in a sense, managers have a commitment really to manage resources. And from those two perspectives, it enables both types of individuals to tie in the entrepreneurial process. Similarly, if we're looking at a business itself, there are perhaps 5 stages in a business venture. One is the idea, then is the opportunity, the actual attempt, managing the business, and well, what do you do with it afterward? Do you sell it? Do you expand it or whatever? And in a certain sense, the entrepreneur is really the key person in the first 3 elements, the idea, the opportunity, and the attempt stage. After that, obviously, is the commitment to manage the resources, which is really that 4th stage manager.
John, as an entrepreneur in your own right, you've gone through the process of getting an idea, putting it into practice, and operating a business. And what are the things that you think, or you think that brought you through the process that enabled you to get from the idea stage into the business operation that you have today?
Well, Bill, I think one of the principal things is the desire to take risk, and when I say risk, I mean controllable or manageable risk, not gambling, but simply saying that here is an opportunity. Now, how do I get control over the opportunity and, in fact, drive it to make a profit? And I think that's the principal motivation, I guess, is the desire to do that successfully. But I think there's a lot of difference between entrepreneurs and managers. For example, entrepreneurs, their basic motivation could be managing risk or making a profit. It could be just seeing a product brought to commercial production. There's a whole range of motives, as distinct from the manager who effectively takes control of the management of the enterprise and makes sure that it is run successfully based on good, sound management information. So those are the major differences.
So basically, we look at an entrepreneur being a risk taker. And he needs an idea. But, you know, there's a whole range. Most people tend to think of I guess, a whole range of operations that one goes through in business, from bookkeeping right on through to marketing. And does one really need to have all these traits to be an able marketer, an able bookkeeper, and an able manager in order to get a business up and running?
No, I don't think that is a prerequisite to being successful as an entrepreneur. But you must, as an entrepreneur, surround yourself with people and services that give you the information that you need in order to be a successful entrepreneur. Bookkeeping is a good example of that, Glenn.
No, I agree with you, John. I'd like to come back to something you mentioned earlier, the whole concept of risk. I like your point about moderate risk takers. As Bill mentioned in the introduction, I teach a program at the Western Community College, and the first thing I do in the first few weeks, I guess, is get rid of a lot of myths about entrepreneurship. And one of the myths I do get rid of is the whole notion that entrepreneurs, successful ones, are high risk takers and gamblers. Again, obviously the whole point of management and moving from the opportunity to the attempt stage is to, again, limit that risk. You need research, you need information, and that's a very important thing, obviously, that one has to remember there. And again, in terms of comparing entrepreneurs and managers, I guess the classic definition of an entrepreneur is, I guess, one who exploits change, who sees things that are changing and exploits those as an opportunity. The population right now is changing. More of us will be over 65 in 20 years from now. Obviously, that's a change in demographics. The entrepreneur is the person that exploits that change. The manager is the person that really doesn't want a great deal of change. He wants to control the change that's occurring. And again, this is why frequently you mentioned the point about what skills does the manager need. The person who starts the concern frequently shouldn't be the person that runs it. And if they are, sometimes it just doesn't go the way it should.
Okay, would you say that's probably one of the reasons that oftentimes business fail, is that the person that has the idea and runs with it really is not the person that should be operating? Is that a fair statement?
Well, that's very often the case. You very often find that someone who has a good idea, such as an inventor, is the last person that should be or has the capability to bring that to commercial production, that invention. It takes very special skills, those of the entrepreneur, those of the manager, together with those of the inventor, which could be substantially different.
I think one of the things that we'll see in this program as well, there are some of the profiles that we did. We've completed about 22 complete profiles of business operations in this area of Atlantic Canada. And one of the things we found that most of the people that got into business really didn't think they were at risk at all, because I think probably they understood what they were going into. They had done their research and all that. And I guess there's two things to that: to go in not anticipating any problems, or go in and not understanding that you are at risk. And again, it goes back to the point that both of you made, that to surround yourselves with good people who can curtail risk, cut down on the risk as we go through.
Bill, I think one of the key things is for the entrepreneur to recognize very early on their deficiencies. In other words, if not everybody can be good at everything, and that's true of every person on the face of the earth. So I think you, as an entrepreneur, have to look inwardly and say, okay, and have a day of reckoning when you say, well, I'm not very good at keeping the books, and but I really do have a lot of drive, and I'm able to control stress. I can, as an example, just on the subject of stress, if business is stressful by its very nature, and if a person has a lot of difficulty in dealing with stressful situations, in coping with the bad days that occur in every business, then they should ask themselves, do I want to do this? I'd perhaps better leave this to someone else if they aren't able to maintain their health, as an example. A lot of people overlook that very important point. Yeah.
Yes, I agree, and once again it comes back to the point of the successful entrepreneur knows when to let go. That is the person that developed the idea and got it into the so-called attempt stage. When should that person let it go? That's really what defines the successful entrepreneur, to get on and then basically get on to something else. I think the real challenge in terms of entrepreneurship and management, and I do find that in my course, Bill, is I emphasize to a greater extent the entrepreneurial side. That whole question of attitude change, that whole question of creativity, the necessity to understand, as John quite correctly put it, the difference between a high risk taker and a moderate risk taker. The whole question of basically knowing yourself, and that's really what we emphasize in the program. The other skills, of course, we give them that as well, but it's that sort of initial stage that's important.
Okay, so basically you're saying to people that first you've got to analyze yourself, you've got to look within
Precisely.
yourself, and I think the thrust of these programs that we're doing here is exactly that, to get people thinking about entrepreneurship, I guess, as an option for what they're doing. But the first step, and I think we've stressed it throughout, is that they must look at themselves and evaluate whether they really want it or not. And I guess that's a key consideration. What about an idea? How does one get an idea? Where do ideas come from? When we're talking about characteristics. So these people that go into to business like yourself, John, where does the idea? Does it just happen? Is there a quirk in your character that gets you out looking for ideas, or is it just being at the right place at the right time, or
Well, there are so many sources of ideas for new businesses. For example, one of the most common is a trade that someone has. For example, they're a skilled carpenter, or they're a skilled pipe fitter, or they're a skilled something else. And very often these people just naturally, those with the entrepreneurial characteristics, gravitate to businesses of their own. There are many other ways, of course. You can, well, one of the traits of an entrepreneur is the inquiring mind. In other words, they're very observant people, and they observe what's going on around them. And as Glen pointed out, one of the things that's happening in our society right now is the advancing age of a larger percentage of our population. And entrepreneurs would naturally think about those kinds of trends in society and say, how can I make a profit from this naturally occurring fact of life? For example, the healthcare field, someone with a little bit of background in healthcare and the characteristics of an entrepreneur might well seize upon an opportunity to look after the elderly, provide a product for the elderly, service for the elderly, and so on. So just by reading the newspaper, by having an inquiring mind, by reading trade journals, and on, these are where ideas come from.
Yes, I agree, and again it gets back to, I think you start from the recognition that opportunity comes from that exploiting change, recognizing changes as they are occurring, and then basically with the ability to exploit those changes. We talked about the elderly, of course, again in our society today in terms of demographics, the whole child care issue. Things are changing there with respect to the family. Obviously, the entrepreneur is one who recognizes that change and can then convert that recognition of change into an opportunity. And if you reflect on successful entrepreneurs, that in essence is what they've done. Whenever change is occurring, that represents an opportunity to the entrepreneur. And again, that particular aspect, Bill, can be practiced. It can be enhanced. Successful entrepreneurs, in fact, search purposefully for these changes. They read newspapers, they listen, and they know basically what's going on around them, not just in terms of the economy, but also in terms of the society. It's society and economy that the entrepreneur is aware of and is ready to move into that.
I think the key word is exploitation.
Exploitation of change as an opportunity. That's really the phrase, and from there, things can unfold.
Okay, well, entrepreneurs, though, but entrepreneurs, they're all around us. We see all different kinds of people into business who are entrepreneurs. And so where do they come from? You know, oftentimes in business as well, you see people that are probably a little bit older get into business. There's an awful lot of young people as well, but they, I guess, in some cases, forced into a situation by change where they get into a business venture for some happening in their life. So where do entrepreneurs come from?
Many entrepreneurs are forced into the position or jolted into the position of becoming an entrepreneur. An example would be someone that's laid off. If a person has a trade and they have a skill of some sort, and their employer says, I'm sorry, next week we don't need your services anymore, all of a sudden, if there's no other job immediately available, many people just go out there and start looking to do something on their own. And I think this is where a lot of potential lies in developing new entrepreneurs.
I agree with that, and I think in Newfoundland, not only with respect to those that are laid off, but also I think that one obviously has two opportunities, two choices, two alternatives in terms of jobs. You either depend on someone else to give you a job, or you create your own job. And again, I find with my students, who of course are not generally in a position of being laid off, they're quite young, and they've made the decision that rather than wait for some government agency or some other business or have to go off to Toronto to get a job, they're saying, okay, I want to stay here in the province and I want to create my own opportunity. I want to create my own employment.
I think you're right, Glenn. I think that this applies to students as well as it does to people that are laid off or people that are retired. I mean, again, somebody that isn't ready to quit the labor force and is being forced out because they're 65, some arbitrary number, and they still have a contribution to make, particularly to themselves, or see an opportunity. That's where a lot of them come from.
I guess there's plenty of examples too to demonstrate on all scales.
And I think, I guess, obviously, when we recognize then what entrepreneurship is, and again, we've both talked about some of the examples of where entrepreneurs come from, and I guess it gets back once again to perhaps society's role here in terms of various agencies and chambers of commerce and development associations. I think what they have to do is create the context or the atmosphere or the environment in which entrepreneurship obviously can take place. And again, it gets back to the whole notion of opportunity, but what I would like to call that sort of perception of opportunity. Obviously, in order for anyone to think they can create their own employment, they have to perceive there are opportunities there. And I think that, again, society, agencies, I think have a role to play there, is that if young people in Newfoundland can perceive there are opportunities in the Humber Valley, in Stephenville, whatever, they will be more inclined to say, yes, that is a sensible career option, because we can't talk about entrepreneurship as a career option for people unless we can really talk in terms of, yes, opportunities exist beyond your training.
One of the hardest things to do is to get potential entrepreneurs to identify themselves to us. When I say that, I'm talking in the educational context. I'm talking about the Pasadena Venture Center.
Yes.
If you could identify someone who has an idea, and the idea is basically sound, then you can help them, I can help them, and he can help them. But it's very difficult to get people to come forward and say, I have what I think is a good idea.
That's right.
Can I get you to help me implement that plan? And if we could do more of that, then we would see even more building of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship in Newfoundland and Labrador.
I think we've identified another characteristic of an entrepreneur is they tend to be secretive. They have ideas and they tend to not want to share them. I think that's a very important trait that entrepreneurs have, that again, that we have to sort of break down and build up a level of trust with private sector groups and government agencies that are out there trying to encourage. And again, it gets back to Glenn's comment about the climate that we have to have a proper climate so that people feel more comfortable in doing something for themselves.
Well, as professionals, we one of the in this process, confidentiality has to be one of the key words.
Yes.
And I can speak only for my company, but we recognize that if someone has a good idea, that the confidence should be highly respected, and that any conflicts of interest, for example, be declared. And I'm sure that's the same way in your case, Bill and Glenn.
Yes.
But we must encourage these people to talk to professionals, as we are in this business, about their concepts in order to be able to help them.
Yes, exactly.
Well, we've dealt with many attributes, I guess, of many characteristics of an entrepreneur. We've looked at the entrepreneur versus the business manager, and I guess you'll get an appreciation now that business managers certainly have some degree of entrepreneurial attributes as well. I think everyone does. I guess the message that's coming out of our conversation here today is that, number one, we've got to look inward, look to ourselves, identify the traits and strengths that we've got, and if we decide to do something, then make sure that we're surrounded by people that can shore up the deficiencies that we know that we have in operating and going through a business process. In just a minute now, I would like to, for both Glenn and John, to give us probably their view and their thoughts on, to you people in the audience today, about getting out there and getting at it. There are opportunities. I'm confident that I think we have to get excited about living in Atlantic Canada, in the area that we live, and all the opportunities that are around us. If we concertedly go out and look for these opportunities and then put together, look at ourselves and find out the things that we have, then we'll do it. Glenn, probably in a minute or so, could you just clue up by giving your views on how you see it? You're educating people to get involved in business, to draw out the entrepreneurial traits. What are your thoughts on where we go in Atlantic Canada?
Well, again, I think it gets back to the comments we've made already. Recognize, first of all, that there are opportunities out there. Again, recognize that one can search purposefully for these opportunities. Again, recognize the difference between the entrepreneur and manager, and know when to let go. And I think perhaps something that you just briefly touched on a minute or so ago, recognize that in each of us basically have a number of the so-called attributes that one talks about in terms of entrepreneurship, an ability to be creative. If you look at any 2 or 3-year-old child, you can see that. Somehow we lose that ability to be creative over the years. I think we've somehow got to recapture that back. And where I start from with my own students, and basically with most people, is that we all have that ability to become entrepreneurs. Most of us, in fact, in Atlantic Canada, thus far have not gotten the opportunity to enhance those characteristics. And what we have to do, and I say we in the broadest sense of educational and different other agencies, what we have to do is to create that context in which these so-called attributes that we all have, for the most part, can be enhanced. And from there, then, direct job creation can occur.
John, you've gotten into business to help people get into business as well, and you must see some opportunity. You must be excited about the area. I guess from the message you've given us, you wouldn't be where you're at.
No, that's true. I saw an opportunity, and one of, I guess, my key roles is to help others refine and to develop their business concepts, while at the same time not trying to be them. And this is a very difficult process. In other words, it's not my business, it's their business. And they are the ones that are going to have to be left to operate it when I'm no longer around. The point, I guess, that I would like to make in addition to all of that is that, and I hate to leave this conversation on this note, but failure in entrepreneurship, failure in a business is not necessarily a bad thing. Now, one should do everything in their power not to fail, naturally. That just makes common sense. But I think if you look at the characteristics of successful entrepreneurs, you will find that they have had failures in their lives in terms of business. And what that does, hopefully, is teaches them something about the real nature of business out there. my message in saying that is that bounce right back. A good entrepreneur will bounce back from a failure and use what they have learned to make a success out of the second round. And again, I don't like to leave the conversation on a negative note, but I think it's a very important point that has to be made.
But John, from my perspective, I don't see that as a negative, because
No, I
the
don't either.
reality of the world and going through life is that you learn as you go. And you know, I think the Americans have a great attitude towards that. I mean, failure is basically you trip up and you stumble and you get up and run again. And I think that's the way we've got to think, because as we've all said today, there are opportunities. There's capable people, and why aren't we more entrepreneurially inclined than we are?
And I think that John's point is very valid, and it really goes back to the whole discussion about the context for entrepreneurship. Part of that context, obviously, has got to be that it's not the end of the world if you do fail. That's part of the entrepreneurial context, and get back and go on with it from there. But that's the sort of thing that we have to work on.
I think there's many examples of that, of people who've fallen down on one opportunity and taken off and run on others and been quite successful, and we can go on with a long list.
Bill, if I could just one last point, if I could suggest to someone looking for a business opportunity, is look for problems. The only successful business will be one that resolves somebody's problem. And there are many examples of it, and there are big examples and small examples. If someone could eradicate the spruce budworm and the hemlock looper and so on, they would be, and do this effectively and inexpensively, they would be very wealthy and so on.
The bigger the problem, the greater the opportunity, and the greater the yield.
So look for problems, and it's just one trait of the entrepreneur that problems, people aren't scared off by problems. They are, in this case, almost encouraged by them. All right.
Yeah.
So look for a problem, find a solution, and herein lies a potential business.
I think it goes back to, again, one of the characteristics that the risk-taking, and if you perceive something as a problem, doesn't necessarily mean the next person perceives it as a problem. They perceive it as an opportunity. We've had an opportunity today, as I said, to look at the traits, the characteristics. We've talked to an entrepreneur, we've talked to an educator, and we've looked at the differences between entrepreneurs, business managers, and the components that you need, I guess, to get it up and running. And I think what the message that I want to leave with you from this program is that why don't you look at yourself, see if you have the traits, if you can see an opportunity, and then try and put it all together, because again, the benefits not only to yourselves but to the general economy in the Atlantic provinces, and certainly in our own province, is just too great, I guess, for us to leave it to someone else to do it. We've done that for a long, long time. We're on I think on the edge of some very dramatic changes taking place in this area of the country. We want to take advantage of them, so we got to start looking within ourselves, and I want to leave the message that so should you, because there are all kinds of opportunities, many potentials, and much room for business development. Thank you very much.
Hello, Gordon Pinsent here again. An entrepreneur is defined as a person who undertakes a venture, organizes it, raises capital to finance it, and assumes all or a major portion of the risk. What are the characteristics of a business person? According to some of the people we've talked to, it takes a little creativity, stubbornness, determination, and even a little insanity to run your own business. Starting your own enterprise isn't easy. It takes most of your time and your energy. However, if you have a strong desire to be your own boss, and you love a challenge, you hate to give up, and if you're not afraid to take risks, then you too can be an entrepreneur.
Well, originally my idea for getting in business came from a 4-year work experience in my husband's business. He ran a pub and he was tired of running it, so I said I'd run it for a while. And I found that I liked it, but I didn't like the hours, 4 o'clock in the morning sort of thing. So I kept thinking, if I could find something else that was daytime hours, that I would quite enjoy running a business. I figured by this time that I was probably going to be good at it. And it just happened that we had access to a building adjacent to the pub, and decided to open a business there. And the idea for the type of business came from visiting a little place in Bridgewater, Nova Scotia, that just fascinated me with the variety of foods I could have been selling rubber boots. It wouldn't have made any difference. I mean, selling is selling, and it happened to be food. And I'm not a gourmet, and I'm not particularly interested in food, but I'm interested in people, and I'm interested in being able to provide a variety of things. So if it wasn't this, it would have been something else. But it would have probably been a specialized type of operation, because there's more fun in trying to dig out sort of the special items to fulfill people's wish for something a little different, something they can't get elsewhere. Of course, there was the arranging of finances, and most people who start in business have no money, and the bank is reluctant to deal with them because they have no money. So you go around and round in circles, borrowing, robbing Peter to pay Paul, to prove to the bank that in fact you have something that you don't have. And they don't really care where it comes from, but if you can show them you have a certain amount, either belong to your husband or your father or your brother, you notice they're all males because they're the ones that have the money, then the bank will maybe lend you some money. So that was the first thing, arranging the finances, arranging with the permits with the city and that sort of thing. And then I used the little store that I mentioned in Bridgewater. I got in touch with those people there and commissioned them to help me by giving me lists of suppliers, because that's, where do you start? You're starting in something you know nothing about, and the way you find out is to go buy from somebody who does know. So they sold me their product lists and were sort of on the end of the phone when I wanted them. And it wasn't very long, it was only a matter of weeks, and I was on my own. So I think that was I started in September, I opened in December. So it didn't take that long, really, to get started.
Okay, what are some of the rewards for working for yourself as compared to working for somebody else then?
I think the biggest reward is being able to say, I did it right or wrong. I had an idea and I saw it through. And nobody's really standing in your way. I mean, you can say that factors stand in your way, lack of money, lack of good staff, this, that, and the other thing. But in fact, what you do is completely and utterly up to you. And it's that feeling of being in control of your life that appeals to me.
You've spoken to some women's groups around the province and been involved in women's issues throughout the years. Have you discovered that women have any particular problems about getting into business through your chit-chat with them?
Most of them find that getting that first bit of money is the problem, or getting additional monies, that the money lenders are a little difficult, or are perceived to be. I'm not really sure whether they're more difficult with women applicants or whether we just perceive it because we're a little apprehensive anyhow, because we're told that bankers are going to be difficult. I'm not certain. But in any event, one thing women find is that they have to be very well prepared when they go to see the banks. They have to have all the papers in order and project a lot of self-assurance. Whereas, again and again, the men tell me, oh, that's a lot of nonsense. All you have to do is go in and talk about fishing and hunting and moose and where you were last night and who you were with. And, the network is there for them and it isn't for us. And so we have to establish a network through other women. And it takes a long time.
When you first started making the plans for your business and doing up your initial plan, and you look at your business as it is today, had you ever anticipated this?
I've been asked that a number of times, and I suppose I hadn't thought of it in terms of the size and the complexity. I had thought of it in terms of a sort of a simple operation, like a corner store except special, and very quickly became more than that. The demands in terms of knowledge, the demands in terms of the type of staff you have to have, the customer that you're dealing with. The customers are very, very knowledgeable, and you have to be able to answer their questions about the products. Most of what I learned from the customers, who are usually very pleased to be able to share what they know with you, and if you keep an ear open. But a lot of it's done just through reading and research. You hear about something, if you have that kind of curiosity to learn, then you can learn very quickly. And so the business grew out of that curiosity, I'd say, to know more, to do more.
Was that something that surprised you, that you had to keep, you don't get complacent with the business, obviously?
I think if you got complacent, you'd get bored. And I have on occasion gotten bored. A few years ago I took a year off, and it wasn't so much boredom as being completely overwhelmed with the volume of work. And that regardless of how much I delegated, it seemed that there was, you know, an enormous amount left on me. And the only way I could get out for a rest was to put somebody else in. And I did that, a little apprehensively, but I was so tired and exhausted from the 5 or 6 years of building the business that I did it, and then sort of walked away completely for a year and left them to it. And they picked up and carried on. Actually, they carried on and did things as I had instructed, which was why I didn't hire them to change things. I hired them to keep things going while I took a break. But since I came back, my enthusiasm has revived, because I'm trying to be a little more realistic about what one person can actually do.
That might be something that might surprise people, is that tired and long hours and long days. That's a fact of life in business, isn't it?
Yeah, most people in business work perhaps 80 hours a week, and you think it and you live it and you sleep it. First thing, when I wake up in the morning, I have dreamt inevitably that, you know, those last few moments of sleep are involved with the business. I wake up with an idea, or I wake up with a solution to a problem I've had. I'm not even aware I'm thinking of it. But, you know, it's not sort of getting up and what am I going to do today, getting up and saying, aha, that's it, you know, because you literally sleep it every day. And most everybody I know in business is that way, that they don't seem to be able to help it. Their mind is on it always.
What is it in Janet Kelly that makes you a successful business person? Is there something that makes an independent business person stand apart from somebody who's working for somebody else?
I think that if you generate a positive attitude about what you're doing, because even when I'm not feeling up to scratch, I still portray the image of somebody who likes what they're doing, because basically I do. And I'm not annoyed at what I'm doing. I'm only annoyed sometimes when my body won't let me do what I want to do. So the enthusiasm is always there, almost always. And that projects to the people that are coming to my store. They see it, they feel it, and it gives them a sense of comfort that somebody is there who cares, even though things can go wrong. Things can go disastrously wrong, and the customers can get annoyed with the way things go, and do, and some of them will leave for a while and then come back, or phone and give me an earful. But we seem to be able to override that, and the enthusiasm also comes from the staff. They pick up from me, I think. And if I'm going around feeling depressed and down, they're going to be exactly the same way, because working conditions for them then deteriorate.
When you started things off a couple of years ago, and I remember you in one of your speeches saying that the first year, well, you know, you sort of looked at your books at the end of the year and said, uh-oh.
Disaster.
What gets you through that? What makes you continue on for year two?
Well, for one thing, if you owe $20,000 and you've also lost $20,000, that you're now in the hole $40,000. Now, the chances of paying that back are nil. First of all, you'd be out of a job, so you had no job. You go look for a job. The reason you went into business in the first place is because you probably weren't qualified for the kinds of jobs that are available. So you have no choice but to stay there. But the bigger factor, of course, is pride. That you decide you can do something, you're darn well going to do it. And that's what keeps you going. And I think it's pride, you know, because I knew that the only thing that was holding me back was lack of funds, not enough capital, not having had enough to get started. And I never veered from that. I always knew that's all it was. I knew what I was doing was right. I knew that the customer's response was good. And it was just a matter of get the right location, which I didn't have at the time and I do have now, get the right location and somehow, somewhere, get enough funds to keep from going bankrupt while you get going.
Where do you see all this in about 5 years?
About 5 years? Well, I always say in 5 years I'm going to be financially comfortable. I probably won't be. I never, you know, in spite of the size of this, the volume that it does, you're always picking up for a bad year or, you know, some new equipment that you've had to get. So really what it boils down to is that you try to keep going into areas, new areas that interest you, and hope that you'll still be able to draw your salary out of it and that you can go to bed at night and know that somebody's not going to move in on you tomorrow and take it.
If one of your friends were to come up to you tomorrow and say, Janet, well, I'm thinking about opening up a small little store, a specialty store, any particular bit of advice you'd give them that sort of, you know, held you through?
I think that the one thing that they have to have is a belief in themselves and what they're doing. If they really believe it, they can do it. The other thing is that if you're going to the bank looking for money and you think you need 20,000, you better get to 40. It's as simple as that, because as much as you plan, there are always these unplanned expenses that crop up. And of course that's unrealistic too, because most people can only, you know, when I started my business I scrounged together $30,000. Not because I needed 30,000 to get started, but because that's all I could get. So that became what I needed to start a business. In fact, I should have had 60 or 70,000, and but in the long run, I managed to get through it. It's extremely difficult. You have to have a lot of backup from your family. If you have moral support from your family, that helps a lot, because you can imagine what it would be like for some woman who went out and started a business, and her husband says, well, I'm not too enthusiastic about this, but if you insist, okay. And she goes out and starts, and then she gets in the situation that I was in 10 years ago, where, you know, everything was falling down around me. And if you have a husband who's saying, well, I told you, that's devastating. I was lucky. I had one who said, come on now, you can do it, and I'll help you out whatever way I can, and, you know, and that's everything. Because when I'd feel like things were all falling apart, he'd say, oh no, tomorrow's another day, you'll do it. He had more faith in me, you know, at that time than I did, and you know, that makes a tremendous difference. If you've got that kind of support, at least you can go home and relax at the end of the day and know that somebody cares, you know. But if you don't, I think it would be very difficult to keep going.
Okay, tell me a little bit now about the history of the business, how you and your brother got involved, and where it started and where it is now. Just sort of like a little rundown of it.
Well, our company started in 1976 and was a partnership between my father and Captain John Hackett, which owns a large purse seiner. And they started then, and 1982, my father bought out all the shares in the company. Our family, you know, completely owned the company. And unfortunately, in 1983, my father had a heart attack and died. And at the time, I was working here with him as a work-term student. I was enrolled in the business program at Memorial University. My brother was attending university, doing an engineering degree. And both of us decided to take some time off from university, and you know, we're certainly strongly interested in continuing the business. We certainly were successful in the past, and you know, we saw a good future in the business, so we decided to continue on from there. Following year, my brother went back, finished his engineering degree, and in 1976 I finished my business degree. And we really continued on, built on the base, you know, that our father put here. And I think, you know, we realize now, and we realize more all the time, that, you know, in business it's kind of, you go one step at a time and you build it block by block. And I think to let something, you know, fall down, you know, I think you really should, you know, try your best to make it, you know, make it continue. And it is a good future. We see a good future in the fish business, and, you know, we continue on. But certainly we have a lot of support and a lot of help, you know, from the people here who work with us, and, you know, from the fishermen that supply us with the fish, you know.
Tell me a little bit about the fish plant now. What kind of product do you bring in, and that kind of thing? How big are you?
Okay, we're, in terms of people, you know, it varies a lot. We're a seasonal operation. Maximum we would have probably around 250 people. And we're offshore and inshore based. Basically about 85% of our supply comes from offshore boats. We're mainly into the pelagic species, which would be herring, capelin, and mackerel. And we're also into some groundfish, lobsters, and salmon from the local fishermen here in this area. We export all around the world, principally to the USA, Japan, The last couple of years we've been successful in obtaining markets in East Germany and in the Soviet Union, but we're geared towards large-scale, low-cost production, and we're competing internationally, in those areas. And we're also working toward moving more into value-added production. Although it's a slow process. You have to just take it, step by step.
Okay, tell me a little bit about the international markets. How did you come by those? You and your brother are fairly young, and all of a sudden you're dealing with Russians, you're dealing with East Germans, Japanese, the USA. Was that something you learned?
I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity really for markets, and I think if you have the right attitude and you're aggressive, and if you have the right products and you're competitive, I think you can always find a market. And what we did is we built on the contacts that our father had established, and we liked we have a good reputation in the marketplace for quality and for competitiveness, and we built on that. And it's really not that I really don't think it's that difficult. It's really a matter of being able to supply the products, supply the quality, supply it on time, and have integrity in what you're doing. Now, when it comes to increasing production and expanding, then you have to be effective in negotiations with banks and with people with the financing in order to increase. So that introduces some risk, and our education helps us in that area, and also because we have a long-term attitude and a long-term commitment to the industry, makes a difference as well. We can look, we can plan things over a fairly long, horizon.
Okay, tell me a little bit about the financial end of things now. I mean, it's obviously not a cheap operation to run, and you're dealing with lots of money I would imagine, on a daily basis.
Yeah.
What prepared you for that, and how, is it difficult?
I think the financing is difficult, but really, what you have to do is you have to prove to the banks and to financiers that you're an acceptable risk. And sometimes, well, when I first started, you kind of feel, well, the banks and so on, they give you a hard time, and they don't really lend the money that you're looking for. But I think if you really sit down and you do out a good plan in your business, and you look at what the cash flow is, you look at the risk, you look at your supply, you look at what the market is, and transform the ideas into something practical on paper, in terms of a plan that can work, and show that to the person you're borrowing the money that you are a good risk and you're going to be able to pay back the money, and there's going to be a business proposition for them. I think you can get the financing, but too often, I find the banks quite good to deal with. It's just you really got to know what you're doing. And there's much more than just having an idea. There's a tremendous amount of work in order to make sure that idea can work. And capital is a short supply. I mean, that's what really gives us the value for our money, is because it's, the demand is greater than the supply. So,
is that something that I guess that would translate to other businesses as well? I mean, not only the fishing business, but any kind of little business, that they've got to have a good business plan and know exactly where they're going.
Sure you do. And as you increase, as you grow larger, becomes much more important all the time, because really it's no longer just an individual, and in terms of management, you have to manage much more people. You have to manage by reports. You can't really do everything yourself. So as you grow larger, I think certainly from a business as a principal point of view, good planning, good accounting, very, very important. It's critical,
It's you and your brother involved so far. You have another brother who's working here for the summer, so it's turned into a real family business. That must be to your benefit as well.
Oh, gee, it's tremendous. I mean, from a business point of view and from a family point of view, for us, if we weren't involved in the business, my brother would probably be in England or somewhere upper Canada or down the States somewhere, and I probably would be somewhere else working. And even outside of business, for the family, it's tremendous that everybody can be together and live together. You don't always get along all that well all the time, but it's tremendous for us and for our brother now. Robert, he's interested in the business, and we'd love for him to come and work for us, but he really has to decide that himself, and he certainly has to get a good education before he would come to work here. So he's studying now chemistry in the university. But no, I think family businesses are very, very good. You get a lot of help, get a lot of work, and even if it's not like I say, even outside the business and the financial side, it's very, very good.
Okay, what are some of the rewards for being in business for yourself right now for you and your brothers as compared to, say, working for somebody else?
I think tremendous rewards. I guess the biggest reward, I think, is that you have the tremendous amounts of freedom, and you certainly in terms of basically the saying, you're kind of your own boss, and you make decisions yourself, and you live with your decisions, and you don't you really what you do, you earn yourself, and I think that's probably the main thing. In terms of financial rewards, certainly if you're successful, there's financial rewards in our business. If you're unsuccessful, there's financial losses. But the freedom, I think, is the main thing that we like about it, and I don't think you would get that opportunity working for somebody else.
Okay, you've been running this now for a couple of years on your own, you and your brother. How has the business changed from when your father left it to you to today? Have you expanded much?
We've expanded, yeah. We've expanded since Father left, but we've really built on the basis that Father had here. We've expanded basically in the same product lines, certainly into different. We're much more bigger in freezing now. We do much more frozen fish production than we did when Father was here. Our management group, I guess, has become larger because since Father's, it's two of us here now. Plus, we try to, with other employees, involve those people in management making decisions as well. But we've expanded. But basically, we've continued on, from where from the basis our father had, and our father's been, quite an inspiration for us, and his attitudes and his philosophy. I think the firm basically has continued with the same type of philosophy.
Okay, you're talking about business plans, and you're always planning ahead. Where do you see yourselves in about 5 years' time or 4 years' time? Where do you see T H Fisheries at that point?
That's a question we asked ourselves, and right now we're more or less in the stage of looking where we should go from here. And in 5 years, it's hard to say. I think we will certainly go more into value-added production. I think we will become much more market-oriented in our firm. I think we'll be probably heading towards maybe sales, maybe a sales office in the U.S. But we're really debating that right now, and we're really drafting up a plan, like a 10-year plan plus really which way we should go. We recognize that we have certain resources, and it's a lot of debating as to really which way we should go. We're interested in a lot of things. We're interested in vertically integrating back into the harvesting off the fish. We're interested in that, and in general now too, with the supply problems that fish is experiencing, from a security point of view, I think all processors or people in the business have to take a hard look at whether they should vertically integrate back into the harvesting as well, which is it's a tremendous amount of risks involved in that. But we're debating it now. But I think in 5 years' time, our company will be changed a lot. I think I see a lot of changes in our firm.
Okay, as well, there are some times during the year when you band together with other fish companies here in the Bay of Islands, like say for a Russian market or something like that. That must be good when you're dealing with people against people like FPI and National Sea. Those kinds of little joint ventures must work to your advantage as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of the big companies, the super companies, National Sea Fishery Products. they're not really too much competition for us. They're in some areas we're into, but mostly they're ground fish companies with their own, large offshore vessels and so on. But in general, I think in terms of Newfoundland, I think that cooperation between all the plants is something that we should strive for, but it should be voluntary. I don't think the government can say, look, cooperate and, you got to do this. But I think, genuine voluntary cooperation where both plants or a series of plants together, they'll benefit more than if they're separate. I think in Newfoundland in general, I think that's been lacking. So here we've had, here in the Bay of Islands, like with other companies, Barry Fisheries, Dunphy Fisheries, particularly like with the Soviet deals, we've had tremendous cooperation, and it's been to everybody's benefit. Our market is very, very large, and I think if we can cooperate together, we can supply that market, and it's better for the area. So, but it has to be something that's voluntary. It has to be something because you like doing business with those people, and you think it's rewarding to yourself. But Newfoundland really has lacked a lot in that. We don't, our loyalty hasn't, I think, in the fishing industry and in a lot of industries, hasn't really been with Newfoundland. So if we can improve the loyalty, between ourselves, I think is better. Certainly if something's good for fishery products and is good for Newfoundland, I certainly support it all the way too.
Attitudes in Newfoundland are changing, and they're changing in a positive way. Up until recently, many Newfoundlanders felt that in order to make their own way in the world, they had to pick up stakes and move. But today, many people are creating their own future right here in Newfoundland by taking the initiative and starting their own business. People realize there's a tremendous amount of potential right where they live. These people could be all around you. They could be a friend, a neighbor. They could be you.